What started as a business arrangement became something neither could have predicted. She believed it was merely paperwork. He assumed she was simply part of the deal. Love wasn't in their plans. Yet when secrets are sealed in quiet moments, who makes the first move to leave? The person who sacrificed everything or the one who never made demands? Tap that like button if you're ready for a romance that begins with deception and concludes with something unexpected for both of them. Make sure to hit subscribe. This is just the start of their journey. They claim the kitchen represents a home's soul. On that particular morning, I found myself standing barefoot in the kitchen, cold marble beneath my feet, listening to the kettle's sharp whistle. Steam drifted upward like smoke from a fire I couldn't extinguish. My palm pressed against my belly, not from routine, not from worry, but because that's where my secret now lived. Silent, expanding, unvoiced, I hadn't gathered my belongings. This wasn't a permanent departure, not quite yet. I simply needed space to breathe without sensing his presence in every corner of this place. The tea kept bubbling behind me. He had always prepared it perfectly. Dark brew with lemon, never sweetened. Lemon made me grimace, though I'd never mentioned it. Perhaps I should have spoken up. Perhaps I should have shared everything. Instead, I approached the table, placed 2 cups down from habit, and positioned the note at the center. Brief words, no explanations, no pleading. Simply, I'm not prepared to belong to you. I'm uncertain if I even belong to myself. No signature appeared at the bottom. No date marked. Just my handwriting, slightly more cramped than usual, and the wedding band. Still circling my finger, I avoided the main entrance. That would have sealed my fate. Dominic spent his mornings in the study, those tall French doors overlooking the rear garden. He wouldn't notice my departure. He wouldn't prevent it. And perhaps that's exactly what I hoped for. Beyond the windows, frost clung to the pine trees. Dawn hadn't yet pierced the morning mist. Everything appeared frozen, as if the world held its breath. I left the car behind, simply walked past the greenhouse he'd constructed but never filled with plants, past the music room where melodies once lived, past the porch swing that groaned in the breeze, the same one I'd sat on only once, the evening following our first genuine argument. That night remained vivid in my memory. He'd declared, "You believe I don't notice you, Emma, but I observe everything." My response had been, "Then why do I feel like I'm disappearing?" He'd offered no reply. Most assume that marrying someone like Dominic Vale means either losing your identity or being purchased. The reality proves more complex. I didn't lose myself because of him. I'd lost myself long before our paths crossed, 23 years old when my father put his signature on the document that granted Dominic legal, public, permanent permission to wed me. My family called it a business arrangement, a lifeline, an escape from financial ruin. I viewed it as a prison sentence, yet I agreed. Nobody twisted my arm. I entered this existence with open eyes, just not an open heart. My plan was simple. Lock my feelings away and survive the agreement. I expected Dominic to remain cold, distant, indifferent. That felt safer. For a while, he matched those expectations perfectly, until everything changed. It began with tiny gestures. How he kept the hallway light burning because he knew darkness frightened me. How he recalled that I preferred my toast barely golden, though he never ate breakfast. How he never made physical contact. Not once, not even accidentally. Until that evening when I stumbled on the stairs and he caught me. His hand shook as he steadied me. That marked the first time I wondered if he wasn't as untouchable as he appeared. Worse yet, that night I began wishing he'd touch me again. Now, weeks later, I was walking away. Not because he didn't care for me, but because he did. Because when love arrived, it wasn't loud. It was whisper quiet, frighteningly soft. It crept in during our long stretches of silence, in the way he watched me when I wasn't looking, and how he spoke my name only when he thought I was sleeping. I couldn't bear it because deep inside, I knew this man, this sharp-edged, emotionally isolated billionaire, had offered me his heart, and I had nothing to offer in return. Not yet. Truck waited at the property's edge. Old, rust-covered, familiar. It belonged to Mrs. Ames, who used to assist my mother with house cleaning. She asked no questions when I called, simply told me to dress warmly and bring whatever couldn't be replaced. I brought nothing except what grew inside me and the weight of my guilt. From the hillside, I gazed back at the house, his house. The place that had felt more like home than anywhere I'd known. Not because warmth filled it rarely did. Not because it belonged to me, it never would. But because he had tried, in his quiet way, to create space for me, and I had taken that space and fled. I don't know how long I'll stay away. I don't even know if I'll come back. But I understand this much. When I left, I didn't slam doors, I didn't weep. I didn't say farewell, because sometimes when you love someone but feel unworthy of their love in return, the kindest act is vanishing. Before they realize they deserve someone better, yet part of me, some stubborn, aching part, hopes he'll read the note, hopes he'll understand, hopes he'll wait. Because even though I departed, I never truly wanted to leave. I remember the day my father sold me as if it happened yesterday, because it marked the first time I felt like merchandise. He didn't apologize. He didn't say, "This is our only option." He simply placed the contract before me, slid it across with a pen, and stated, "Your mother would have approved." She always believed in duty. I remember staring at those papers, at the neat block letters spelling out my future like a business deal, at the figure, an amount too vast to comprehend, clearly printed in bold beside Dominic Vale's name. And I remember thinking, if I sign this, I'm no longer my own person. But I didn't cry. I didn't beg. I didn't storm away. I looked down at the ring on my finger, an old silver band with tiny leaves etched around its circumference. My mother's ring, the one she wore even after illness, thinned her hands and turned her hair to ash. She used to say, true love doesn't begin with fireworks, it begins with sacrifice. So I signed. Not because I believed I was rescuing my family, but because in that moment, I needed to believe someone's sacrifice would have meaning. My first glimpse of Dominic Vale in person came on our wedding morning. He didn't smile. He didn't extend his hand. He simply nodded once and said, "We won't need to repeat this." The ceremony took place in a chapel with vaulted ceilings and no windows. Empty pews except for 2 witnesses on his side and my father, half drunk and chewing gum, on mine. I wore a dress I hadn't chosen, shoes I couldn't walk in, and a veil that gave me a headache. The priest recited vows like a grocery list. Dominic slipped the ring onto my finger like someone checking off a task. No kiss, no music, no photographs. Just silence. And his eyes, gray, unreadable, but watching me too intently. He didn't touch me on our wedding night. Didn't even enter the bedroom. Instead, a note waited on the nightstand in that same precise handwriting. You'll have your own space. No expectations, no obligations, just time. It should have brought relief, but it didn't. Because I hadn't realized until then that part of me had anticipated something. A gesture, a glance, a crack in his armor. But Dominic Vale was nothing if not well defended. Weeks passed in quiet routine. He departed early, returned late, spoke little. I learned the staff changed so frequently, I never remembered names. Meals arrived but weren't shared. The house, despite its grandeur, felt like an elegant tomb. Still, I did what I'd been raised to do. I pressed my own shirts. Brewed tea each morning, though I didn't drink it. Watered houseplants that were artificial. Somewhere during those days, I began playing piano again. The same hymns my mother hummed while washing dishes. The ones she claimed helped her feel less alone in this world. One afternoon, I played something gentle in a minor key, barely audible. When I turned around, Dominic stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets. He didn't speak. He didn't applaud. He simply said, "She's to play that." I wanted to ask who, but I knew. There was a photograph in the hallway I'd passed countless times but never examined closely until that evening. A woman with dark hair, smoky eyes, and a faint smile that didn't quite surface. She wore a ring nearly identical to mine, her hand resting lightly on Dominic's shoulder. I stood there for a long time, not from jealousy, but because I finally understood why every wall in this house wasn't just painted gray. They were gray. Every inch of this place was still mourning, and I had walked into it carrying nothing but a silver ring and a borrowed surname. One evening, I wandered into the library. The fireplace hadn't been lit in months. Curtains remained drawn. A grand piano occupied the corner, its lid partially open, keys untouched. I lifted the lid completely and discovered something tucked inside, an incomplete composition. No title, written in Dominic's hand. The notes stopped halfway across the page like someone had given up mid-thought. A faint pencil mark circled the final chord. D minor, a key of sadness, my mother's favorite. I didn't take it. I didn't question him about it. But that night, for the first time, I placed my teacup on the desk in his study beside his. He didn't drink it, but he didn't move it either. We never had fights, not real ones. But there were moments, sharp and loaded, when our silences felt deafening. Like the morning he caught me humming in the hallway and stopped mid-stride. Or the night I dropped a glass and he appeared instantly, hand already, reaching to catch the pieces before they hit the floor. I remember how close we were then. How his breath fogged the air between us. He didn't speak. He just looked at me like he was memorizing something fragile. And I felt my body betray me because part of me wanted to lean forward just enough to fall. But I didn't, because I still wore the ring and still didn't understand what it meant. That was who I was then. The girl who wore her mother's ring, who followed rules she'd never agreed to, who believed survival meant silence, but silence is a form of death. And love, I was beginning to learn, doesn't exist in stillness. It exists in risk. It happened the night the power failed. Not the kind of blackout that throws a city into chaos, but the kind that creeps in like a whisper over the hills. Silent, sudden. I was halfway down the staircase when the lights flickered, then died, and the house fell into deep, unnatural quiet. The storm had been building all afternoon. Clouds hung low, swollen and gray, but Dominic hadn't mentioned it. I'd seen him that morning in the hallway, coat draped over his arm, heading out. His eyes had swept over me like wind over glass, and I thought, what would happen if I vanished? Would he notice? The answer came sooner than expected. I'd gone to the library searching for candles, not because I needed light, but because the darkness was starting to feel like judgment. I fumbled near the bookshelves, one hand extended, the other grazing. The cold mahogany. I just turned the corner near the spiral staircase when my heel caught the rug's edge, and I fell, not hard, just enough for air to leave my lungs. But before I could hit the floor, arms caught me. Strong, warm, familiar. Dominic, he said nothing. His arm steadied me, one hand behind my back, the other under my wrist. I was close enough to feel his breathing. Slow, uneven, nothing like the man who moved through the house like a ghost. For one suspended moment, we simply stood there. I didn't dare breathe. The storm cracked outside, but I didn't flinch. Not because I was brave, but because I feared. Breaking whatever this moment was, then his hand, still on my back, trembled slightly, but it was enough. Enough to make me look up, enough to realize he wasn't holding me like a husband holds a wife. He was holding me like someone terrified of letting go. "Are you hurt?" he asked. His voice was rougher than usual, almost human. I shook my head, still uncertain whether I'd imagined it all. He stepped back then, almost too quickly, and I missed the warmth immediately. The absence was sharp. He cleared his throat. "You should be more careful." "Difficult to be careful in the dark," I murmured, brushing dust from my dress. There was a pause. "Then I'll get the backup lights." But he didn't move, and neither did I. The library windows rattled in their frames. I turned toward the piano. It sat there, lid closed, keys hidden, a silent monument. I walked over and ran a finger across the polished surface. "You used to play," I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded once. "A long time ago." I glanced back at him. "Why did you stop?" He didn't answer, but his silence was thick, full of unspoken things. Then, almost too quiet to hear, he said, "She played." "She..." "The woman in the photo." And I realized this wasn't just about music. This was grief with nowhere to go. I lifted the piano lid. The keys waited, still and expectant. My fingers hovered above them. I didn't know what I was doing. I hadn't played since my mother's funeral, but something in me ached to fill the space between us with sound. I played the first notes that came to me, an old lullaby, the one my mother used to hum on nights when the house creaked, and my fears were too big to name. The melody wobbled, uncertain, but it was real. On a stop, when I stopped, I didn't turn around. I just asked, "Do you miss her?" Silence. Then, every day, I nodded. I miss my mother, too. We stood there in a stillness that didn't hurt this time. For the first time since I'd arrived, I didn't feel like a stranger in his house. I felt like a person. Later that night, as I returned to my room, I found something strange on my nightstand. It wasn't a letter, not tea, just a folded sheet of music paper, blank except for the top corner where he'd written a title in pencil, Emma in D minor. No chords, no notes, no melody, just the name. Mine. I sat on the bed, the sheet in my hands, heart racing. He hadn't said anything, hadn't explained, but it was there. Proof that something had shifted, that he'd begun to hear me, maybe even see me. I didn't sleep much that night. The storm passed. The lights flickered back on. The house resumed its quiet breathing. But I couldn't stop hearing the music that wasn't played, the hush of his voice, the tremble of his hands, the way he caught me like someone trying not to. Lose himself again. That was the night I realized I didn't hate him, not anymore. Maybe I never had. Maybe I'd just been afraid of what it would mean to be truly seen. I pressed the sheet music to my chest and whispered just once to the dark, "I see you too." I used to believe silence made me strong, that if I didn't explain myself, if I just endured, swallowed, disappeared into quiet, no one could hurt me. But that morning, standing in the hallway with a folder in my hand and Dominic's eyes on me like frost on glass, I realized silence doesn't protect you. It buries you. He had discovered the contract, not the official one. Not the version my father handed over with a trembling signature and a price tag, but the original draft, the one I had requested, the one I had signed before anyone asked me. Too, I didn't mean for him to find it. I kept it buried under linens in the bottom drawer of the guest room. I thought no one ever opened those drawers, but Dominic had always been thorough. It was one of the things I both hated and admired about him. He walked into the parlor with the papers in hand and a look I'd never seen before. Not anger, not betrayal. Something colder. Something like disappointment. He held it up. "When were you going to tell me?" I opened my mouth, closed it. The fire crackled behind him, but the room felt frozen. The truth was simple. I had known about the debt before my father said a word. I'd overheard his conversation with the creditors. I'd seen the unpaid bills tucked behind the sugar jar, and I knew what marrying Dominic Vale meant for my family: protection, status, a second chance. But no one came to me with the offer, so I made it myself. I found the lawyer. I drafted the proposal. I told them it was my father's idea, but it wasn't. It was mine. I didn't want you to think I started. What? Dominic said, quiet, too quiet. That you were just another name in a ledger. I swallowed. That I came here to take something from you. He laughed, not cruelly, just hollow. You already did, he said. I stepped closer, my fingers tightening around the fabric of my sweater. I came here to save my brother. That's what I told myself. But the truth is, I looked at him. I came because I thought this would be easier than waiting for someone to choose me. His brow twitched. I didn't think love was ever going to happen for me, I continued, voice shaking. So I thought maybe this is what women like me get. Arrangements, contracts, rooms down the hall instead of a place in someone's life. Dominic stared at me, silent, and for the first time I couldn't read him. Not a flicker. I stepped back. I'm sorry, I whispered. He didn't move, didn't answer. He simply turned and left the room, the contract still in his hand. And I was left alone with the echo. That night, he didn't come home. The house felt different without him. It wasn't just the absence of his footsteps on the stairs or the lack of light under his study door. It was the weight of something unraveling. I wandered through the halls like a woman haunting her own life. Every corner held a piece of him, a book left open, a jacket on a chair, a mug still half full of cold black tea. In the library, the unfinished music sheet was gone, and I couldn't tell if that meant it was finished or if he had thrown it away. Passed then a week. No calls, no messages, just silence. The kind that doesn't numb you, but makes everything louder. Mrs. Ames, the housekeeper, found me sitting by the window on the 7th day. You haven't eaten, she said, placing a bowl of soup beside me. I'm fine, I said. She looked at me carefully. That man was lost long before you came here. I didn't answer. She placed something on the table, a letter. He left this with me before. He left. Told me to give it to you if you ever looked like you were waiting. I hesitated before opening it. The envelope was blank. No return address, just my name in his handwriting, sharper than usual. Inside was one line: I didn't want love. But now that I've had a taste of it, I can't stand the emptiness anymore. And below it, folded into the crease, was the title page of the sheet music. It no longer said Emma in D minor. Now it simply read home. I pressed the paper to my chest and closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I let myself cry. Not because he left, but because I finally understood I hadn't been the only one afraid of being chosen. He was too, and I'd handed him a contract when what he needed was a reason to believe he was worth loving again. That night, I packed a small bag, not to chase him, but to go home. To the house I grew up in. To the brother who still looked at the world with hope. To the bedroom where I first learned to play music, not for performance, but to feel whole. I needed to. Remember who I had been before I became someone who thought love could be negotiated? I locked the front door. I looked back at the house and whispered, "This isn't over." Because for the first time, I wasn't running. I was returning to myself, so that when I saw him again, I'd be ready to choose him. Not out of duty, not out of fear, but out of love. I returned to the house I grew up in, expecting it to feel like home. It didn't. The walls were still the same pale yellow my mother had painted years ago. The same photographs hung slightly crooked on the hallway nails. The kettle still screamed when it boiled, but something essential had gone missing. And it wasn't just her. It was me. Caleb, my younger brother, opened the door with sleep still in his eyes. He blinked twice like he wasn't sure I was real. "You came back," he said. "I needed air," I replied. He didn't ask what happened. Caleb never did. He was all instinct, all warmth, our mother's heart without her body. He let me in, took my bag, and poured a cup of weak chamomile tea like nothing had changed. But everything had. I was a wife now. I was also very, very alone that night. I lay in my old bed and stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks like constellations. Somewhere in the room I'd left behind, Dominic was doing the same. Or maybe he wasn't. Maybe he'd already turned the page. I turned on my side and reached instinctively toward the nightstand. There was no sheet music there. No pencil title, no name dot in the morning. I walked to the market with Caleb. People stared, not out of malice, but curiosity. The girl who left and returned in a different coat, a wedding ring, a new silence behind her smile dot at the fruit stand. I saw Mrs. Rivera, who used to sit with my mother during chemo. Her eyes crinkled with a kind of soft recognition. "You look tired, Emma," she said gently. "I think I am," I replied. She handed me a small paper bag. Inside was a lemon and a sprig of mint. "For the bitterness," she said, tapping my wrist. I didn't ask whether she meant the tea or my heart dot later that day. I found myself in the attic. It smelled like dust and lavender soap. I opened the cedar trunk where Mom kept her winter quilts and saw, folded neatly between the fabric, a small journal. Her handwriting on the cover, to be read only when you forget who you are. I almost didn't open it, but I did. The first page was simple. "Emma, if you're reading this, you've probably lost something or think you have. But I want you to remember, losing yourself to protect someone else is still a kind of love. But finding your way back is how you make it yours again." The words hit like breath after drowning. My mother had spent years fading from this world, yet somehow her voice was the clearest thing I'd heard in months. I turned the page. Tucked inside was a photo of her and my father, young, before the bitterness, before the debts. They looked happy. No, they looked willing, like people who had chosen love even knowing it might one day unravel. And suddenly, I understood. I hadn't failed by loving Dominic. I had failed by never telling him that I did, by thinking he'd see it through my silences, my caution, my fear. But love doesn't live in what you conceal. It lives in what you choose to reveal, imperfectly, vulnerably, completely. That evening, I went into the backyard and found Caleb sitting in the grass with his sketch pad. He was drawing trees like he always did, still quiet things with roots. "You going back?" he asked, not looking up. "I don't know," I said. "But I did. Do you love him?" I exhaled. "Yes," he nodded, satisfied, then stopped hiding it. Simple as that dot. The next morning, I woke before the sun. I packed a small bag, just one coat, no plans. As I turned to leave, Caleb stopped me at the door. He pressed something into my palm.mom single quotes S ring. "You dropped this," he said. "Or maybe you were waiting to wear it again." I stared at it for a long moment, then slid it onto my finger, right beside the one Dominic had given me. Not over it, beside it. Because I didn't have to choose between who I'd been and who I was becoming. I could be both. The drive back felt different this time. No tension, no dread, just purpose. When the house came into view, it looked just as I'd left it, tall, severe, silent. The porch lights were off, the curtains still drawn. But something was different. A small package sat on the steps. Inside, a folded sheet of music and a note. "I'm still writing this, but I can't finish it. Without your voice." I stood there for a long time, clutching that paper, the wind pulling at my coat, my eyes stinging in the cold. He hadn't locked the door. He was waiting. He hadn't left. Not really. I had, and now I was ready to return. Not as the girl who offered herself like a transaction, not as the wife who mistook silence for dignity, but as the woman who finally understood love was never the thing that made me small. It was the thing that gave me back to myself. The door was unlocked. I stepped inside and waited for the silence to resist me, but it didn't. It welcomed me. The house smelled the same: cedarwood, old paper, and faint lemon. But there was something warmer threading through the air now. The fire in the hearth had been lit, not roaring, but steady. Not demanding attention, just waiting, like he was. I found Dominic in the music room. He didn't look up right away. He was sitting at the piano, head bowed, fingers hovering above the keys, as if afraid the sound might betray something too tender. Cup of untouched tea sat beside him, still steaming. Black with lemon, no sugar. It was the only thing he ever drank. It was the only thing I never learned to love. But I brought my own now, chamomile and mint. I placed it beside his cup, our differences finally side by side. Only then did he speak. I didn't think you'd come back. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath, something brittle. I wasn't sure I would, I admitted. He nodded as if he had already prepared himself for that. But then he added, I kept the door open, just in case. I took a step closer, my heart catching in my throat. I wasn't running from you, Dominic. I was running from the version of me who thought love had to be earned by disappearing. He looked at me, really looked. And I saw it, that flicker I had missed so many times. Not just longing, not just sadness, hope. You never had to earn anything. He said, you were enough just standing there. I swallowed hard. Why didn't you say that? He looked away. Because I thought if I said it, you'd realize I didn't deserve you and you'd leave. I did leave. Yes, but you came back. I walked to the piano and sat beside him. The silence between us was different now, not empty, full of everything we had never dared speak aloud. I looked down at the keys. My hand rested on middle C. He said softly, I finished the piece. I turned. He passed me the sheet. Title, Home. I read the notes. They started in D minor. They ended in C major, a journey from sorrow to peace, from absence to arrival. You wrote this for me? I whispered. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. I placed the music on the stand and played the opening bars. My fingers trembled at first, but his hand found mine. Quietly, gently, just resting there. Not guiding, not controlling, just present. When the final note faded, we sat in the stillness. I wasn't awkward. It was sacred dot, then he said, stay, just one word. No promise, no pressure, just a place to land. I turned to him. Only if I get to change things. He raised an eyebrow. Such as? I'm cooking dinner tonight. You hate cooking. I used to. But I think it's time this house smelled like something other than regret. He smiled then. Not a full smile, but close, and it lit up every shadow. Later, in the kitchen, I burned the rice and oversalted the soup. He didn't complain. He didn't offer to fix it. He just pulled up a chair, rolled up his sleeves, and cut vegetables beside me. When I dropped a spoon, he didn't flinch. He just picked it up and said, try again. And I did that. We ate in the dining room together for the first time. No silver trays, no separate ends of a long table, just 2 bowls, 2 spoons, and a folded napkin between us. I asked, did you ever imagine this? He said, only in pieces. Which part surprised you the most? He looked at me, that you came back before I finished the song. After dinner, we walked through the house like it was new. I showed him the spot on the staircase where I used to sit and cry. He showed me the corner of the library where he hid letters he never sent. I opened one. It said, I wanted to tell you that the way you hold a teacup like it might break is the same way I've been holding my heart since you arrived. I pressed the letter to my chest and whispered, I'm here now. He didn't answer. He just helped me. That night, I slept in the room we used to call mine. Not hers, not the guest wing, just mine. Because he never slept in that room without leaving. The light on in the hallway. And I never asked him why until now. Why the light? I murmured, curled beside him. His voice brushed my temple. So you'd know you weren't alone. Even when the door was closed, I felt tears prick at the corners of my eyes. I thought I had to stay quiet to be accepted. He kissed the top of my head. You never had to be quiet. And for the first time since I stepped into this house, I believed him. That night, I dreamed of nothing. And when I woke up, he was still there, breathing steady, real. The house didn't feel like stone anymore. It felt like wood, warm, woven in. Held together not by silence, but by choice that it didn't happen all at once. The change was slow, subtle. He moved his office to the sunroom where I could walk by and wave. I planted rosemary in the kitchen window. He made breakfast on Sundays. We burned a few things, laughed. We opened the curtains, let the light in. The house had always been beautiful, but now it had something else. It had us imperfect healing, choosing each other day by day. The past came knocking on our door just when the house had finally stopped. Echoing, it was a Tuesday. The garden smelled like rosemary and sun-warmed brick. Dominic was at the piano, revising the second movement of Home. I had just finished folding laundry, humming under my breath, when the doorbell rang twice, sharp. Uninvited. I opened the door and saw the man who had once traded my future for a check. My father. He hadn't changed much. Still wore that coat. Too big for his shoulders. Still smelled faintly of tobacco and faded pride. His eyes scanned the marble entryway like he was tallying costs. His gaze stopped on my ring and narrowed. Well, he said, you've done well for yourself. I didn't move. What do you want? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Just came to. See how my daughter's faring in the lap of luxury. You didn't check when I was broke? He clicked his tongue. Ungrateful. I folded my arms. You sold me. You signed. His words cut like ice. But this time, I didn't flinch. Dominic appeared in the hallway. Silent, but unmistakable. He didn't say a word. Just stood behind me. Not shielding, not interfering, just present. I didn't need protection. I needed to speak. You didn't come for me, I told my father. You came because you think I owe you something? He scoffed. Don't pretend this wasn't a fair trade. It was never fair, I said, voice steady, but I made peace with it. What I haven't made peace with is this lie you keep telling yourself that I belong to you. He blinked. Dominic stepped forward then, his voice like steel wrapped in velvet. She doesn't belong to anyone. Then softer to me, except herself. My father bristled. So this is how it is. You find a man with money and forget where you came.